today with a wonderful colleague, Alexis Curtis-Harris, who is Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion for our sister company, Penna. Both Penna and LHH are part of the Adecco Group, and we both work to connect great talent with great employers. But Penna work really closely with companies to help them become the first choice of employer for the talent that they want to attract. So in their own words, they help clients find, excite, and secure the best people. And Alexis is their #1 expert in ED&I consultancy, having recently been shortlisted for both the British Diversity Awards and the Diva Awards. Alexis helps her clients audit, explore, and develop their own strategies around inclusivity. As many of you will know, in the UK, it's been Neurodiversity Celebration Week. And as we come to the end of that week, we thought it was a great time to ask Alexis to talk through some of the stereotyping around neurodiversity, particularly related to talent acquisition. Alexis will go on to talk about creating inclusive strategies to help us understand how we can be an exciting prospective employer to all talent and how we avoid becoming inaccessible. The purpose of Neurodiversity Celebration Week is to help the world understand, value and celebrate the talents of neurodivergent minds. But with only 35% of organisations having had one or more senior leaders share that they are themselves neurodivergent, it feels that there is still a lot of work to do to make workforces feel properly welcoming. So I'm going to hand over to Alexis now, and we'll make sure there's plenty of opportunity to ask questions before our hour together is up. If you think of questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A or in the chat, and then we can run through some of those when Alexis has finished her presentation. Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you, Jodie. What an intro. Thank you so much. If I can ask you to skip forward a slide, please, that would be great. Fabulous. So obviously we've got this here. Do connect with us through LinkedIn properly. But yes, let me introduce myself. Good morning, everyone. And as Jodie said, welcome. Thank you so much. As she's done a fantastic intro, I am Alexis Curtis-Harris. My pronouns are she and her, and I am, as Jodie said, the head of ED&I at Penna. It's so amazing to welcome you to our webinar. I could see the numbers totting up, and it's brilliant to have so many of you here today, especially to round up what is so important, which is Neurodiversity Celebration Week. So today, I wanted to take us on a little bit of a journey, I guess, to understand how we can all refine our talent attraction strategies to authentically represent and engage with talent, and in particular neurodivergent talent, because for everybody our goal should be crystal clear, and that is that we should be challenging outdated views. We should be appreciating the full spectrum of neurodiversity and really fostering a workplace environment that not only recognizes but also celebrates the unique strengths that individuals bring. So first of all, we've had a bit of an intro, but just, I guess, to introduce Penna, as put simply, we help employers get people excited about joining them, as it says on screen. And we do this by combining our expertise in employer brand, in digital advertising, creative solutions, data, equality, diversity and inclusion. What I will say is today I'm going to use the acronym ED&I, and that just means equality, diversity and inclusion. So for us here at Penna, our approach is tailored every single time. We focus on understanding our clients' unique set of challenges. And my role as the head of ED&I is really to support organisations, to support employers in communicating with and engaging with and attracting a much more diverse talent base, and more specifically those who are marginalised, whether that's historically, culturally, socially, or those that are underrepresented in organisations. So I wanted to start with, I'll call it the basics, but that doesn't mean that you should know what I'm going to talk about, but to really understand what we mean by neurodiversity. So something that is becoming more and more obvious is that as we continue to navigate the complexities of, I guess we can call it the modern workplace, the conversations around ED&I have substantially broadened. I think everyone can probably agree with that, in particular over the last few years. And when I say broadened, I mean broadened to encompass not just visible differences, so the way we look, the way we appear externally, but also those that lie within as well. And something that is very central to this ongoing discussion is the concept of neurodiversity. Now, of course, neurodiversity is not new. In fact, even the term itself was emerged, I think it was the late 1990s, which again, it wasn't even new then. But something that is great is that the understanding and awareness of it has gained some real significant momentum in recent years. So I guess, what do we mean by neurodiversity? What is it? Well, neurodiversity refers to the broad range of natural variations that we all have within our human brain regarding sociability, regarding learning, whether that's attention or mood or other kind of mental functions. And it's a perspective that basically recognizes, but not just recognizes, values as well, these differences as a vital and inherent aspect of human diversity, rather than seeing things as deficits that need to be corrected or disorders that need to be treated. This concept encompasses a variety of neurological conditions, acknowledging that every individual's neurocognitive profile influences the way that they will perceive or interact or engage with the world that is around them. So neurodiversity challenges these traditional views of normal brain function. I hope you can see me, and you can see I'm putting quotations around normal, just in case you can't, that's what I'm doing. But it basically challenges those views and basically advocates for a much more inclusive approach, and an approach that respects and supports all forms of neurological variations. It promotes environments where everybody's unique cognitive traits are acknowledged, are appreciated and leveraged. But the term itself does more than just categorize neurological differences. It challenges us to rethink our definitions of normal, as I said, or what is optimal in our learning, our working, and our creating. So this divergence, it's not a deficit, it's a difference. And so neurodivergent individuals will often possess what I would say is our extraordinary skills, no matter what way you look at them. However these strengths are, they often do go unnoticed or unrecognized due to prevailing stereotypes and biases. And this can manifest itself in a way that we engage with or attract neurodivergent talent when it comes to recruitment. And so that is what I wanted to focus on today. So before we do take a more in-depth look at stereotypes and biases, I just wanted to cover a little bit of terminology. As we know, terminology consistently changes, language changes, but the words that we use are really, really important. And getting them right is about kind of a level of respect, but also setting a level of precedent for those around us. So there's 3 words on screen that you're going to hear me probably use quite a bit today. They may look very similar in the way that they are, but they are all slightly different. So just to start with neurodiversity, as it kind of says there, this is about, and I've already said, recognizing the range of differences in our human brain function. So I guess saying that in a sentence, you could say like, our company's commitment to neurodiversity has led us to XYZ. Neurodivergent is the word that we use to describe an individual whose brain functions differ to what is considered societal normal or typical. So you'd say, as a neurodivergent individual, you bring XYZ to the table. And then just finally, neurodivergence, that refers to the state or condition of having these cognitive processes that diverge from the dominant societal standards. So you would say, understanding neurodivergence is crucial for us to create a supportive environment, etc., etc. So I just wanted to clear that up first. I believe you're going to get these slides as well as a reference point, so you can also keep hold of them for any definitions that you might need moving forwards. So, as I've mentioned, when it comes to recruitment marketing or talent attraction, the way in which we communicate is so important. And what I often see is that in attempts to appeal to or engage with a more diverse audience, and obviously in today's case, we're talking about a neurodivergent audience, I often see so many stereotypes being played out right before my eyes, or used, or bias coming into play unintentionally. And I will say unintentionally, because I do believe this is very often unintentional. Now, not only does that not create an inclusive and accessible experience of the talent that you are hoping to engage with, but by relying on stereotypes, we exacerbate these stereotypes. And so the next section is going to focus on this particularly. I guess just to make sure we're on the same page, what do I mean when I say bias? Well, bias refers to the tendency or inclination to often favour or oppose something or someone or a particular group, and often in a way that can be irrational, unfair, or unbalanced. And bias can arise from many, many different reasons. I'm not going to go into all of it because I want to focus on the stereotypes today, but this can be conscious, which we often call explicit bias, or unconscious, which we often call implicit bias. But both of these things essentially can affect how people perceive or interpret or interact with each other, and that can lead to kind of skewed judgments and decisions. But on the next slide, what I wanted to go into in a lot more detail is stereotypes. Now, again, just for clarity, if you don't know, or to make it clear, when I talk about stereotypes, these are those more generalized beliefs or assumptions about a person or a particular group of people, usually based on a protected characteristic that doesn't account for individual experiences. So very often, they oversimplify the complexity of individuals, and they can lead to inaccurate judgments or false expectations. So when we're talking or looking at advertising or attraction content, the inaccurate representation or marginalization, or at its very, very worst, discrimination of certain groups, is often perpetuated by this over-reliance on stereotypes, or the use of harmful stereotypes when portraying these groups. I think something that is important to note, though, is I'm not saying we always have to avoid all stereotypes. That might sound like a strange thing to say. Rather, we should avoid harmful stereotypes, and we should avoid the over-reliance on them. So, for instance, in imagery, in marketing content, in collateral and photography, it's great and it's not wrong to represent disability as somebody who may be a wheelchair user. But the point here is the over-reliance. That shouldn't be the default and the only way to represent. It is really, really important to ensure that we are also representing a diverse range of disability, including non-visible disabilities, like very often neurodivergence. And not only do stereotypes box individuals into narrow and often negative perceptions, but they can, I always think, lead to like what's the words, like that self-fulfilling prophecy type notion. So you hear stereotypes so much, you hear them frequently, you start to believe these misconceptions, and you might even start to embody them. And that cycle can start to erode self-esteem and limit personal and professional growth. So next, I'm going to guide us through some examples of stereotypes that are often perpetuated in the media or creative. And the purpose of highlighting these isn't to exacerbate their impact, it's to raise awareness. Because when we become more conscious of these stereotypes, we can begin the work that is essential to overcome them. And it's important, I think, just for me to note at the start here that the examples I'm about to share are just a fraction of the stereotypes out there. I obviously can't cover everything today. And the goal is not to provide an exhaustive list, but it's really just to illuminate patterns and get you thinking about things that might otherwise go unchallenged. So first up, we have, by the way, I come up with these names. These aren't universal names, so don't go Googling these. They might not come up with everything. But we have up first what I've termed the autism default misconception. So what I mean here is there's a prevalent stereotype we often encounter, and that is that very often all neurodivergence is reduced to a single condition, and very often this is autism. And this simplistic view assumes that when somebody mentions neurodivergence, they're referring exclusively to autism. And such a narrow perspective actually overlooks the vast spectrum of neurodivergent conditions. So this can include ADHD, brain injury, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, obsessive compulsive disorder, often known as OCD, misophonia, social anxiety. And I'm not even listing them all here, and I'm going to stop there, otherwise I could keep going. But you can see there's such variety, and each of these conditions comes with its own unique set of characteristics, unique set of challenges, yes, but most important, it's unique set of strengths. And so this stereotype emphasizes the need for a broader, more inclusive understanding of neurodiversity. So next, we have the homogeneity myth. It's a word I always can never say, so if I said that wrong, I do apologize. But this stereotype is often focused on the notion of neurodivergent. Basically, it's where people are all the same. It's a stereotype that people who are neurodivergent are all similar or all the same. It suggests that people who are neurodivergent will share similar experiences, abilities, strengths, challenges, triggers, and it paints this picture of uniformity that really, really starkly contrasts reality. Because in truth, neurodivergence encompasses a really, really wide spectrum of conditions, each distinct and complex in its own right. And in fact, even those who may share the same condition will again not be uniform in their characteristics or their challenges or their strengths. And the experiences and attributes of individuals within any given condition can vary dramatically. So, for example, two individuals with the same neurodivergent diagnosis might have entirely different strengths or face entirely different challenges. And so acknowledging that diversity is really, really crucial for dismantling stereotypes. Then we have the obsession oversimplification, and basically this stereotype categorizes neurodivergent individuals as being dominated by uncontrollable obsessions or fixations. For instance, an all-consuming interest in music or a specific subject or a game, for example. And actually, this stereotype misrepresents the nature and variety of interests that neurodivergent people may have. It's crucial to understand that just like anybody, just like everybody, neurodivergent individuals can have very deep passions and enthusiasms that could bring them joy, bring connection, opportunities for skill development. But these kinds of interests shouldn't be dismissed as just an obsession. In some cases, what might appear as an obsession could actually be a form of engagement or a coping mechanism, especially with those who may have some sensory sensitivities. And this may be something that allows them to navigate and interact with the world in a way that feels comfortable and meaningful to them. And really and truly, the range of interests among neurodivergent individuals is as diverse as their personalities, with some having broad and more varied fascinations rather than narrowly focused ones. So recognizing the diversity and depth of interest and challenges means that thinking about that overcomes the stereotype and highlights the unique contributions that people will bring to communities and the workplace as well. Next is the maths genius misconception. So here, this stereotype suggests that all neurodivergent individuals possess extraordinary maths prowess or inherently brainy in all intellectual pursuits. And okay, whilst it's true that there are some neurodivergent people, or just some people in general, that may display what can be deemed as remarkable abilities in maths or other cognitive areas, this generalization that everyone's the same overlooks the vast diversity within neurodivergent populations. And notably, for example, there are conditions, and I mentioned dyscalculia earlier, a neurodivergent condition that actually specifically can impair an individual's ability to understand numbers and mathematical concepts. So that in itself challenges this stereotype directly. Neurodivergence encompasses a wide array of conditions, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again, they all have their own distinct set of challenges, yes, but distinct set of strengths as well. And so the experience or intellectual prowess of individuals should not be categorized into this genius box. Then we have this antisocial introvert stereotype. I've seen this a lot in like media and TV shows and films and things like that, and it's harmful. Labeling all neurodivergent individuals as antisocial or introverts perpetuates a damaging stereotype that unfairly characterizes them as maybe disinterested in social interaction or inherently struggling with socializing. Now, of course, these can be traits that some conditions can present themselves as, but the point here is that this stereotype fails to capture the complexity and variability of social preferences and abilities amongst neurodivergent individuals. Yes, as I said, it's true that some individuals might face challenges in social situations. Many others could find joy and fulfillment in socializing and building relationships. So their neurodivergence does not automatically preclude them from seeking or enjoying social connection. So by dismissing these kinds of stereotypes and recognizing the diverse social experience of neurodivergent individuals, we can start to foster more inclusive and understanding environments that will value all forms of interaction and communication. And then finally, we have the fixable condition fallacy. So this misperception or misconception essentially frames neurodivergence as a personal ailment that needs to be fixed or cured. That not only stigmatizes, but also discriminates against neurodivergent individuals by suggesting that their natural brain functioning is something that is undesirable or needs to be corrected, which is not the case. Neurodiversity represents the vast and natural variation in human cognition and functioning, warranting acceptance, warranting the phrase I don't like, normalization, and celebration, not remediation. The responsibility should shift from expecting individuals to change who they are to encouraging workplaces and society at large to adapt to their environments, their practices, their attitudes, to be genuinely inclusive and supportive of neurodivergent people. Actually, I don't know if you've heard of the social model of disability. It's not a universal model, but if you don't know much about it, I would suggest going and taking a little bit of a look at it. I personally find it really interesting. And the model basically says that more often than not, people, not always, people are more disabled by the barriers in society rather than their impairment or difference. So it's interesting, and it generally helps as well with overcoming this stereotype. So I would recommend having a look if you can. Okay, so as you can probably see, addressing stereotypes and barriers against neurodivergent individuals, it transcends more than mere correction. We have no option other than to make this a transformative journey towards deep systemic change. And this process begins with fostering an empathetic understanding of neurodivergence, recognizing that neurodivergent individuals experience and interact with the world in profoundly unique ways, and that is okay. Such diversity, often markedly different from neurotypical patterns. I didn't mention this at the start, actually, sorry, but neurotypical, again, is another kind of word that I've probably said a few times today, and that essentially means that somebody whose brain cognitive functioning is that society expects, and functions how society expects. So neurotypical patterns, if you're different from that, or you're neurodivergent, essentially, that shouldn't be viewed as an obstacle, but rather a valuable source of innovation. And in the realms of media or marketing or recruitment, stereotypes will often crystallize into quite cliched language and imagery, narrowing the representation of what is the ideal candidate and inadvertently kind of sidelining neurodivergent individuals. And this not only marginalizes a significant portion of the talent pool, but it stifles individuals and stifles their progression and their ability to showcase their strengths. So in media, marketing, attraction, stereotypes about neurodivergence can perpetuate these misconceptions and actually end up reinforcing the barriers that exist to understanding and acceptance. So we must address these, and why, I guess, first of all, it challenges and changes the narrative. Will help us to promote a more accurate and nuanced portrayal of neurodivergent individuals. Secondly, it influences public perception, gradually kind of eroding these stigmas associated with neurodivergence. And thirdly, or lastly, should I say, it educates and informs and paves the way for a society that values and seeks to understand the complexities of neurodivergence. So when we actively dismantle these stereotypes and create, obviously in this case, recruitment campaigns that accurately reflect the spectrum of neurodiversity, we champion a much more inclusive narrative. And again, in recruitment, this helps us to attract neurodivergent talent. And in the next section, I'm going to go into some of these tactics in a bit more detail. Actually, if you can skip one more slide forward, please, Jodie, that would be great. I want to dive straight in because I know we started a little bit late. So just to start with, inclusive job descriptions. Pretty much every job, or every job should have a job description. And stereotypes or bias in job descriptions not only deter a diverse range of candidates, but they also perpetuate a narrow vision of the ideal workplace or the ideal employee. And so these stereotypes very often in job descriptions will manifest in the language that we use, which, whilst can be seemingly benign, can actually significantly influence who feels welcome or who feels capable of applying for a position. So for instance, so I do a lot of working with clients on job descriptions. So these are things that I really do see. So for instance, describing a role suited for someone who thrives in a fast-paced work environment. You've probably all seen that on a job description somewhere. Actually, that unintentionally can exclude those who excel in more deliberate, thoughtfully paced settings. I often see must be a team player. That can be misleading, and actually it might discourage individuals who excel in independent work or who have different ways that they contribute to team efforts, when actually what you could do in that instance, rather than saying must be a team player, you could specify the nature of teamwork involved. Another one I always see, and again, you've probably seen this yourself, is excellent verbal communication skills required, or something along those lines. And actually, the language there, that requirement might deter candidates who are more adept at, for example, written communication, or those who use alternative communication methods. Also, to me, the phrase or the word excellent is just so ambiguous. What I think is excellent, you might not think is excellent, and vice versa. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. More inclusive phrasing could be strong communication skills, and you could say whether through written or verbal methods, all are valued. And you just acknowledge the breadth of effective communication skills. And the list goes on. Must manage multiple projects simultaneously, looking for high energy individuals, must be flexible under pressure. These kinds of things, you're probably sensing a theme. I think you can see where I'm going. And obviously those are just a few examples. There are many, many more. So what can we do about this then? Well, firstly, I would always say audit your language. As I say, part of my team's role, we do a lot, is to conduct language analysis for our clients for their job descriptions, because by regularly reviewing job descriptions and marketing materials to identify and remove language that can inadvertently prioritize neurotypical traits is so important. It can involve replacing jargon or overly broad terms with more specific skill sets or qualifications. Again, like for instance, if a job description says ideal candidate should be able to thrive in a dynamic, fast-paced environment. Well, you need to consider, what is dynamic and fast-paced? What does that truly mean for the role? If it's about adapting to changing priorities, for example, then say that. Say candidates should be comfortable adapting to evolving project priorities and timelines. So the next strategy is effective communication of neurodiversity, and that involves articulating your inclusive policies and practices in a way that resonates with a wide-ranging audience. So this involves articulating your organisation, your policies, your practices in a way that resonates with this audience. Since neurodiversity isn't always visible, emphasising your commitment to inclusivity becomes even more crucial, because your messaging needs to extend beyond mere visuals, embedding this into every communication to signal your support for diversity. And this commitment includes promoting flexible work arrangements, personalised support systems tailored to meet individual needs, ensuring that these are prominently highlighted in every candidate touch point. It's about being able to narrate the diverse experiences within your workforce, demonstrating that you're not only welcome, but you eagerly anticipate the unique contributions brought by neurodivergent talent. And adding to this, I guess, is ensuring candidates that they understand how to request reasonable adjustments. It's so important. It's not about making assumptions about what individuals may need, but instead fostering an environment where requests for accommodations are encouraged and met without judgment. So provide really clear information on how your company addresses accessibility, both digital and physical, reassuring candidates that their needs will be accommodated, and encourage that open dialogue about accommodation support from the offset. Something else that's really important in the work that we're going to do in recruitment marketing is the power of visual representation. It can't be overstated. Now, of course, a unique challenge, as we've touched on here, with neurodiversity lies in very often, not always, very often it's invisibility. Neurodivergent conditions don't have a uniform appearance or, as I say, very often visual markers. Therefore, our approach to inclusive imagery and representation must be thoughtfully curated to reflect the true breadth of diversity in our workplaces and our communities. So you need to showcase and highlight your diverse work environment. So in your visual communications, ensuring that variety includes images of different workspaces that cater to different needs and preferences, quiet zones, for instance, areas that are for focused work, collaborative spaces for team projects, adjustable workplace or workstation setups. And these kinds of things can signal to potential candidates that you value and support diverse working styles. And beyond static imagery, incorporate stories, testimonials from your neurodivergent employees. This could be in the form of short videos, written profiles, or social media features, for example, where you have employees sharing their experiences, the accommodations that support their success, and how the inclusive culture has impacted or supported their professional journey. Because these kinds of narratives will add depth to your visual messaging. I often get asked, okay, so you're talking about stereotypes. How do I show to an audience through imagery, for example, neurodiversity? We've talked about it being visible. And I think the point here is that that's not the only way to show. It's through support, it's through experiences, it's through stories. So ensure that your campaigns or marketing or recruitment marketing reflect the diversity of experiences within the community. Avoid all those stereotypical portrayals we've talked about. As I said, there are many more as well. And focus on the strengths and contributions of neurodivergent individuals. Also, again, just few little tips. You can, when you're coming to these kind of things, collaborate with neurodivergent artists, photographers, content creators. It ensures authenticity in your representation. Your organization and the diversity of your workforce is going to evolve, so keep updating your imagery and your stories to reflect these changes as well. Slide, please. So in today's, I guess, digital world, we could call it, ensuring that your online platforms or websites are accessible and welcoming is essential. Now, digital accessibility isn't just about compliance, although of course there are elements of compliance that are involved in some cases, but it's a fundamental aspect of creating an environment where all potential candidates, regardless of their neurological profile, can easily access and engage with your content. So start with the basics, I guess, by ensuring that your website is fully compatible with screen readers, other assistive technologies. Simplify navigation to make it intuitive for all users, regardless of how they interact with digital content. And that could be things like organizing information in clear hierarchy, using descriptive links, ensuring any clickable elements are easily identifiable. And people process information in very, very different ways. I know that for instance, when I'm watching something video, I need to have subtitles. It's the way my brain processes things, and it helps me to take the information on board and really understand what's going on. Everyone's different and people process things. So if you're having things in multiple formats, for instance, as I say, traditional text-based content, also with videos, captions, or text transcripts, all these things can really help with making content more accessible and ensuring that those who are taking in your information are able to do it in the way that works best for them. Actually, there's again, something if you want to look into it afterwards, something that I've seen EY do, not a client of ours, by the way, but EY, they have developed this Neurodiversity Centre of Excellence. It's a huge, huge project, but the one small thing that's really always stood out to me is that they enable job descriptions in multiple formats. So they have them in written, they have them in video, they have them in infographics, they have them in audio. So really, you have a lot of different ways to be able to take that job description in. Because when you prioritize kind of accessibility and having these welcoming designs, you don't only enhance the user experience for neurodivergent individuals, but also for all of your sites visitors as well. And then one of the most important, if not, I would say, the most important possibly, is to continue to support neurodivergent talent beyond the hiring process. Now, I've talked a lot today about how we're attracting and engaging with talent. That's the area that we work within here at Penna. But attracting neurodivergent talent marks only the first step in fostering a truly inclusive workplace. True inclusion goes beyond initial accessibility. It's about the sustained support, the sustained growth and opportunities that you provide to neurodivergent employees after they join your team. Ensure that their successes and well-being is done by embedding continuous support mechanisms and, as I say, fostering that culture that values and leverages unique perspectives. Someone said this to me once before, and I've now stolen it and use it in pretty much all my sessions, but access does not equal inclusion. A simple statement, right? But it's so true. Ensuring accessibility is, yes, crucial for engaging a neurodivergent audience and supporting their entry into your organization, but that doesn't mean you're inclusive, because genuine inclusion requires much, much more, and it demands a commitment to nurturing their talents, acknowledging contributions, and providing the tools and environments that they need to thrive long term. So finally, to wrap up the session, I have got one eye on the clock. I just wanted to end on summarising, I guess, 5 key things to take away from today. So on the next slide, number 1, embracing and promoting neurodiversity at every level. So here, recognising the value of neurodivergent talent and the perspectives that they bring, and make a conscious effort to challenge stereotypes and biases in job descriptions, in marketing campaigns, in everyday interactions. Celebrate the diversity of thought as a cornerstone of innovation and of growth. Number 2, audit and adapt your communications. Regularly review, continuously review job descriptions, listings, marketing materials, internal comms, external comms, anything that is in contact with an individual, to ensure that they're free of exclusionary language and stereotypes, and use clear, inclusive language that reflects the specific skills and qualifications that are required for roles. As I say, it's always this, what's essential, not what's desirable, and always highlight your organization's commitment to diversity and inclusion as well. Number 3 is foster an inclusive and flexible working environment. So implement policies, practices that support diverse working styles, such as flexible hours, remote work options, customized workstations, and create that culture that values and supports individual needs, encouraging everybody to thrive, and then make sure that you externalize that to your target audience as well. Number 4 is invest in accessibility and ongoing support. So ensure that your digital presence is accessible to all, and establish these clear pathways for individuals to request accommodations. And then again, beyond hiring, provide neurodivergent employees with ongoing support as well. And then the 5th and final one is to seek feedback and engage in continuous improvement. Continuously and actively, where you can, seek feedback from neurodivergent employees or candidates or audiences, and chat about their experiences, and use this insight to drive improvements in your recruitment processes and workplace practices. And just remember that inclusivity is an agile process, but it benefits from continuous learning and adaptation. And thank you so much. Those are my 5 top tips, and I hope they were helpful. And yes, I'll hand back over to you, Jodie, if there's any questions.
So thanks very much, Alexis. We've had a few comments actually during when you've been speaking, particularly around that piece about it's not just about somebody accessing a job spec or the interview, it's about when they come into your work environment, how does that feel? And I think it's so important, that ongoing support. We don't want to do this so that we can attract people into a company where they're actually not going to feel welcome and have the same opportunity to use their whatever it is unique set of skills to develop a really broad career. So first of all, thank you for sharing so much. I'm just having a look to see if we've got some questions that people have sent through. So there are a couple, if you're all right to answer those, Alexis. So one is around, and I guess this has probably come from somebody who supports a group of people who run teams. So what support can be given to managers who have teams with neurodivergent individuals in them? How do we support those people to make sure they are bringing out the best and nurturing all the talent they have?
I mean, I guess you'd always start with, training and education as probably might not be obvious, but the more obvious kind of answer there in terms of helping people upskill. I talked a lot there about continuous improvement as well, and that is so important. And that's not just to make sure that people are consistently being reminded of things, but also things change a lot. We see this in language being one, but we see this so much in just developments in the natural world. I think those feedback loops as well are really important in terms of speaking to the members of your teams who, as you say, may be neurodivergent, to have regular check-ins and get those feedback on, are things working, are things not? Something as well that I read somewhere, I don't remember where I read this, was that also I've read that managers who have been trained on supporting neurodivergent individuals and implement this, it doesn't just support those who are neurodivergent. It actually supports everybody, because that working style opens a lot more for transparency and honesty and openness, essentially. So yeah, I would say kind of training, education, providing resources to teams as well, because it's not just as well about managers being aware of neurodivergence. It's important that everybody in the team is as well, whether you're neurotypical, whether you're neurodivergent, just to ensure, as I say, that collaborative learning, collaborative problem solving, collaborative support as well.
Great, thanks. Another question that's come in is, what would you say are key markers of a supportive culture when it comes to neurodiversity? And are there green flags to look out for during the interview process?
I think what I would say when I'm looking at organizations, I think from a engagement point of view with audiences, I would always say those that are the most transparent are the ones that engage me a lot more. So what I mean by that is, you see a lot of blanket statements. We support diversity, we want an inclusive workforce. And my first question is always, why? Now, that might be a bit of an obtuse question to ask, but what's your actual intent behind this? Is it because you want to tick a quota? Is it because you're actually want to make a difference and support your individuals who are joining your team? So I always push back on what's your intent behind that statement. Generally, I get a nice positive and response back. But yeah, the markers, I think, are those that I say open, honest, and provide guidance and actual actions, so to speak. So giving kind of insight and information on examples of what support has been given previously, but having that open mind to understand that just because I've not mentioned it doesn't mean you can't ask for it, or doesn't mean we can support you with it. I was at the Institute for Student Employers conference last year, and there was a session there with two young ladies who both were neurodivergent, and they were talking about their recruitment process and what they'd experienced. And I think for them as well, when it comes to, for instance, things like reasonable adjustments, is even just the way that you're talking about that can really make a difference. So for instance, they were saying that when language was like, what do you need? Like, what support do you need? They were like, well, I don't need anything. Like, I'm absolutely fine. But actually, if you're offering it in a way of what support can we give you, and help, and shaping it in a way that is about support and encouragement, rather than insinuating you need something because you have something missing, these kinds of things can really kind of stand out to me as organizations who are really understanding of what needs to be done and are open to listening.
Thanks. Yeah, let's look out for in the language people are using. Okay, I think we've got time for a couple more. I'm trying to pick through the ones. I think, is it appropriate to directly ask new team members, people, or prospective hires, if they consider themselves to be neurodivergent in the way of what support as you join our company would be helpful? And I think from some of the other text on it, it's around, because the support mechanisms might be so unique, you would want to have an open dialogue on that.
Yeah, of course. I think one thing I would say is that it can be a sensitive subject. I think it is probably not always appropriate to outright ask somebody if they are neurodivergent. Obviously, there's an element of privacy and respect, and someone's literally just written in exactly what I was going to say.
I think it can be scary. Yes,
it can be scary, and again, based on societal expectations, you could possibly anticipate discrimination because of disclosing something. So you don't want to ever kind of ask somebody a direct, I would say, but what you, again, by creating these inclusive environments, what you can do is encourage voluntary disclosure and encourage that environment that enables kind of consent that enables disclosure in a private and consensual way. So when you have these inclusive policies, practices, environments, cultures, then obviously the idea being that you can naturally kind of encourage people to disclose. But no, I wouldn't go in and ask someone outright. You can ask things like, is there any additional support that I could be offering you, and things like that. But yeah, you don't want to be like, do you have a neurodivergent condition? That won't land too well.
Quite a straightforward, I guess. But is there software that can look at the language you're using and check whether it is going to be, to some sense, in some sense, not inclusive? And is it effective, in your opinion, if it exists?
So yes, there are tools out there that exist. I can't specifically say if they're focused on neurodivergent language, but yes, there are tools out there. My personal opinion on these is that they don't often take into account context and nuance as much as, for instance, a human going through. There are benefits to these kind of tools. They're quicker, of course. Like you put something in, it spits it out a bit like AI, and it's like, wow, that took a second. Now I'm never going to be able to read something in a second. So there are obviously value. So there are a few of them out there. What I would say is, just from my own experience, is that I always think it's more effective to have a person, a team. That's why my team often get involved in analysing language, because you take into account context. What I've seen sometimes is they'll pick out a word and go, this word is not inclusive. And it's like, well, in the context that it's given, it will always kind of pull out things like analyst as being, for instance, well, if you're an analyst, you can't not say it. So that's a very extreme example. But yes, I think there are, but I would always encourage a human intervention there as well.
Okay, great. And how long do you find you tend to have to work with a company who maybe has a good intention but has some antiquated processes to get them to a more open way of working?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the short answer is it takes a long time. Because it's a consistent learning process. We do all the work and then it's going to consistently change. I think there are certainly I always hate the phrase quick wins when it comes to diversity and inclusion, because there is no such thing, but there are, let's call them short-term interventions that can be made to support, but it is a long-term thing, because it isn't just driven by one person. This needs to be a cultural shift. So yeah, I couldn't give you a time frame, but what I would say is it's unfortunately not a quick fix.
Okay. Thanks, Alexis. I think we're pretty much out of time. So a massive thank you for running through that with us at the end of a special week. I guess for me, you've said it to me before, but access does not equal inclusion. It's an ongoing journey in all ways. And actually a great shared learning experience actually for colleagues who want to go through this type of process. I think we will make sure, I think that everybody who's joined us today can access the slides. There's a way to access myself or Alexis if you're interested in finding out more about what we do. We really appreciate you joining this morning. We hope everybody has enjoyed it, has learned something, has felt, oh gosh, yeah, I've experienced that. Oh God, I've never experienced that, and it provoked some thought. So everyone have a great weekend. Thanks again, Alexis, and we look forward to speaking further with any of you who want to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Bye.